So this is a one-pager about SoloSegment. And Steve and Katie, if there are any updates, let me know because I'd like to keep it up to date. This is also available on the Slack workspace in the SoloSegment channel, as are other materials, including links to the prior presentation that Steve gave and some sales materials. So SoloSegment company, it's about 5 years old. They have a staff of roughly 8 people. They're self-funded, currently profitable. And CEO is Steve Zaker. I'm going to put Katie, I guess I'll add you to that as well as another contact. Of course, if there are any leads that come out of our trusted referral network, they should come to me first so we could vet them and then register them with SoloSegment. SoloSegment has 3 products. They're sort of very tightly or interrelated to one another, all around personalizing the experience and personalizing the content for people visiting very large, complex websites, almost exclusively B2B. And the products are Guidebox, Searchbox, and Matchbox. Matchbox, and Steve's going to tell you all about them. The rough prices range from like $50 to $150K a year. Target customers are, as Steve will describe in greater detail, companies and organizations with large websites of, considered 100K or more that are content heavy, complex. They're typically large B2B companies with $1 billion in revenue or more, or 1,000 employees or more. But it could be a website that is just a huge website that's more of a reference website. So one of their clients is the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, which is certainly not a huge organization, but they have a huge website of something like 1.3 million pages. The company is either digitally advanced or not getting value from their portfolio, or they're a bit of a digital laggard, but they have got a desire to change, right? If somebody doesn't have an interest in actually upgrading, probably not a good lead to pursue. Pain points, they've got large amounts of website content that's difficult to navigate, but really important for visitors to find. Typically, if you've got more than 100,000 pages, you'll have low conversions, high bounce rates, because it's difficult for people to find what they're looking for, even if the content is there. Have some information about competitors and alternatives. There's certainly built-in tools on CMSs. For example, Drupal has their own, Adobe Experience Manager has their own, but they tend not to be as sophisticated as what SoloSegment is offering, because they don't have that intelligence built in. You can go through some of these others as well. Our deal with as a network with SoloSegment is 15% of revenue for 3 years, and the TRN member who brings the lead gets half of that commission, as is the case with all of our deals. If you have questions throughout the presentation, please enter them into the chat. And so we'll get to them at the back end. It's a pretty small group, so it shouldn't be that complicated to manage. And I'm handing it over right now to Steve, who's got a presentation that he will go through.
All right, thanks very much, Michael. And
absolutely.
Good to meet you all. It's, gosh, I've always been waiting for Friday to come all week, and it just seems to never get here, but I guess tomorrow's Friday, so good. So SoloSegment, the best way to think of SoloSegment is we are a marketing technology company. And so, we talked, or Michael showed a little bit of our competitive set there, but, we are definitely a best-in-class company focused on personalization. So we're kind of, if you think about the big integrated sets like Adobe, Oracle, and Microsoft, we do a component of what they do very, very well. So it's a best-in-class technology. The thing that really differentiates SoloSegment is for these large enterprise B2B companies, we personalize the content without having to know who the person is. And one of the most fundamental challenges that every B2B company has is identifying the person. And that's why traditional technologies don't work. So we provide that personalized experience using AI to make sense of anonymous data and then, stitch together a personal journey. And, we're all consumers. So if we think about our consumer lives, is there a company that knows us, that seems to know what we want before we know it, delivers what we want and puts it in front of us. And of course, everybody thinks of Amazon or, pick your retailer of choice, but they're the ones who do this very, very well. And the reason they do it is because they know everything about us. We willingly give them everything, about us. And they use that data for good purposes, figuring out, what kind of things we want and helping us find that stuff, and then ultimately helping us get that stuff. There's excellent trade for value. And that really is a fundamental underpinning of the problem in B2B. Because when you think about companies like these are examples of our clients, these companies don't have, it's hard for them to trade for value. So if you run a construction company and you want to buy John Deere's construction equipment, so you go to their website, you're trolling through, you're looking at products, etc. There's really no reason for you to give John Deere any of your information. They don't need it. Maybe you give them an email address because you want to download something that they've gated. But at the end of the day, for every B2B enterprise on the planet, they struggle with this same problem, right? They can't get the personal information that fuels their technology, that fuels traditional technologies. And so they have all these anonymous visitors that they really struggle to know what to do with, know how to address them. And not only is it a problem for marketers, but it's a problem for marketers because it's an expectation of the buyer. Again, in our personal lives, we get all this great personalization, and we don't, know about the value trade for personal. You don't think about that intentionally. So when we come to the B2B website, we just assume, oh, they're going to be able to do it too, and they can't. So not only is it a problem for B2B marketers because they want to engage and progress, but it's also a problem for the visitors because they have expectations that are not being made. And, when you think of most of these, go to IBM, go to Adobe, go to Oracle, go to Microsoft's website, when you think about, finding anything there, it's tremendously difficult. First and foremost, websites are organized like the organization charts of the companies, right? They're not generally organized in terms of thinking about the problems that customers have, thinking about the solutions that they can do, they're trying to get to those problems. And there are a lot of reasons that happens. A lot of it having to do with how senior executives at these companies are compensated. But again, it's very difficult to find things. And so that leads to, all the problems that I think anybody who's been in the B2B space understands. You're getting a low yield on your marketing activity, and you're ignoring, honestly, those customers who are actually more likely to convert because you're not giving them something to help them progress their journey because your content is all generic and hidden. And when you think about the technologies that B2B marketers can purchase to help them solve the problem, a lot of that technology grew up in the B2C space, in the retail space. So any personalization technology that exists today was largely, hammered out in retail, trying to mimic essentially Amazon, right? Everybody wanted to be like Amazon. And so whenever you go to a website and you log in, or just from a cookie value, they seem to know what size you are and what colors you prefer and all that other stuff. Those technologies were very well honed in the B2C space. And they were created not only knowing something about you, the person, but also that ability to sift and sort clothing sizes and clothing colors and all those things. The data is very well structured. If you went to someplace like IBM's website, there's no selection bar that says, I'm a medium-sized business in this industry. I have 42 employees, $7 million worth of revenue, and I have a lead generation problem. You can't click those factors and all of a sudden it sorts down to the solution you have, although it'd probably be pretty cool if they did, because the data is not structured well. It's just big blobs of text, right? Page after page after page of text. So it's very difficult for these technologies to work effectively, these traditional technologies to work effectively in the B2B space. And so the ROI is pretty miserable when they do these large scale implementations. It's kind of akin to the fact that they buy an ocean liner so that they can, cross literally the pond in their backyard. And so they're not getting a lot of value for this. And even where they are getting value in the pieces of the technology they can implement, the time to value is extraordinarily long, right? The implementation is very difficult. They have to coordinate across the enterprise to get things done. And what SoloSegment does is we help our customers kind of break down all of that. It's an easy to deploy technology. It works with anonymous data. So you're not doing all the wrestling with IT. You're not doing all the wrestling with data. You're not doing all the wrestling with all the stakeholders who could exist in a 200,000 person large enterprise company. We make it easy for our customers to get started, and we make it easy for their customers, because at the end of the day, that's why we exist, right? We're trying to simplify all those journeys that these customers are on websites to make it easy for them to find the thing it is that they're looking for, and where they don't know what they want, to guide them to the things that they think, or we think the model thinks that they'll need. We have 3 products in the market right now: Searchbox, Guidebox, and Matchbox. Searchbox and Guidebox really are about the web experience. So, there's basically 2 ways we interact with websites. We search and we navigate. So Searchbox is a technology that optimizes the search experience, that makes their search engine much more intelligent. So we work with any search engine. Alternatively, they can adopt our search engine and just use the whole stack to have a better search experience. Guidebox is the personalization technology really at the heart of our offering these days. That deals with the navigation use case. So as people are navigating around the site, how do we keep them focused? How do we keep them moving along towards content, towards events and goals that align with their interests, with their intent? And so that's what Guidebox does. And then finally, Matchbox is kind of a behind the scenes technology, but one of the great problems that marketers have in guiding and nudging people to the right content is they don't really know what their content's about. And that sounds kind of silly, but when you create 300,000 pages of content, it's hard to get everybody in your company who creates content to be coding that the same way. It's about this category, about this topic, about this industry. It's very difficult to do. And today there are technologies that make it possible for that work to be done automatically at scale. So again, I talked a little bit about Searchbox. What's really special about Searchbox is we have a proprietary methodology for measuring search success. And that's the great unknown in search. When you think about a search experience that we have every day, you do a search, you get a results page, and you click on something. And that click is really a promise, right? That click is, I have done the work, the search engine has done the work to find you the top thing, the most relevant thing to what you want to know. And Google does this really, really well, right? How many people scroll down 5 pages in Google to find the answer they want? It's always the top 1, 2, or 3 result. And so, but this is tremendously difficult for companies to do. Part of that's because they don't have Google's technology. But the other part of it is that they don't have all the content in the world, right? If you had all the content in the world like Google, you could sift and sort through and find the best answer out of, a bazillion pages of content. But on a website, you might have only a few answers about every query. And how do you discern which of those is the best answer based upon what the visitors typed in the search box? And so we have a proprietary set of data that looks at what happens after the click to really understand successful interactions from failed interactions. And so that's what Searchbox does. And not only does it provide an analytical dashboard, which you see here, but what it really does is automates the improvement. We feed that success signal back into the search engine to automatically make the next search better. And so this is a way that companies can invest in search without having to have lots of people involved to make their search engine better. Easy to deploy, fully configurable. This is an example of Guidebox. So that little gray bar at the bottom of the screen is an example of Guidebox. This is a personalization technology. And what Guidebox is doing, how those 3 things appear at the bottom of this page, is that Guidebox is looking at a lot of data about the website. It's looking at search data, so it draws in the search data. It's looking at content. And then finally, it's looking at all the web journeys that have gone on the website over time. And we gather that data ourselves. So we don't integrate with their analytics package or their CMS. We actually have a way of gathering all of that data ourselves. And we create models that basically try to predict two things when somebody comes to a web page. The first thing is, what do we think they're trying to achieve? Is this the goal that they've just landed on, or are they working towards some other goal? And then the other thing we're trying to predict is what piece of content will nudge them towards that goal. And you can imagine sometimes it's hard to guess that. So, but with these three data sets that are around search intent, the content itself, and journeys, we're able to construct for every web page some prediction generally. I mean, there are times when we don't have enough data based upon where somebody was and where they're going to really understand that. But in general, it's a pretty powerful engine that is able to make those recommendations in real time to increase engagement on the site. Has a good ROI, which is what IT people are interested in. But what business people are interested in is, are you proving engagement? Are you reducing exits? Are you reducing bounces? Are you progressing people towards their goals? And so this is one case study that we did with a client that kind of demonstrates that, yes, indeed, Guidebox on the page does help customers progress towards their goals and gives the companies the returns that they seek. And then Matchbox is kind of a behind the scenes technology. I talked about this ability, whenever you create a piece of content, you like to, put in these tags to understand what it's about. Some of that, and some of you I heard earlier are organic search people, that used to be really important for Google, right? So we'd put all this metadata in. It's much less important these days. What it is important for, though, is, internally in the website, if somebody clicks on a page and wants to see the products listed, well, you got to associate all the pages on your website with, say, that product or that solution or whatever, right? So these tags, these categories that people assign to web pages help with the function of the website. Unfortunately, you have to trust that all those content creators are not only going to do the categorization of their web pages when they create them, but are going to do it accurately. And it is totally hit or miss. This is an example of ASME's project that we did before them. So they had 300,000 pages of product content on their website. And before we started working with them, only about 3,000 of those page owners had tagged their content, no real sense of whether it was accurate or not. But after using natural language processing to read pages and understand what they're about, and using machine learning then to take that insight and label all these pages at scale, we applied 400,000 labels to 200,000 pages in essentially a day, right? The machine just kind of runs through all the content and labels it. So this is an example of how Matchbox can greatly improve the productivity of people who are interested in this topic within a website, within a company. And generally those people are taxonomists, content taxonomists. Some of them are librarians, literally within companies. But these are people who are really interested in this notion of findability. And so while the previous two products are generally in the sweet spot of, say, the marketing shop, right? So we're talking to VPs and directors of marketing are good targets for Matchbox and Searchbox. I'm sorry, for Guidebox and Searchbox. Matchbox really is targeted at, sometimes it's in the marketing organization, sometimes it's in, if they have a customer research team, sometimes it's in the IT shop. But Matchbox is really targeted at these taxonomists, these people who are really interested in the notion of classification of content to improve findability of that content across the enterprise. Here's just an example of what that looks like, and this is an example off of where does this data get used? Well, if you can imagine, I was talking earlier about search when you're on a retail site and you can choose the size and the color and all the other variables that go around, say, clothing. This allows you to create a faceted experience so you can do it around content. So this is just an example of the left-hand portion of a search screen might look at, like, oh, I'm interested in advanced engineering or advanced manufacturing topic. So you could click on that. And if you have all your content labeled, Matchbox gives you the ability to do that sifting and sorting of content, much like folks experience in their retail lives. So the cognitive model is very, very similar to what folks experience in their retail lives. So who are our target customers? Digital transformers. You know, Generally, it's companies who already have some traction digitally. We do have a few customers who are in the chemical industry. And these are generally digital laggards. These are folks who are way behind the times with regards to digital transformation, digital technology adoption. They still largely believe in field sales and shaking hands at trade shows. And by the way, they largely believe in that because it's effective for them. Of course, now that COVID has come along and both those things aren't available to them, they're getting some religion. That said, those companies are very early. And so companies that are true digital laggards are really hard to sell to. So you're generally looking for somebody who's a little bit further down on their digital journey, where they're thinking about things like, how do I automate all this manual work that I have in the marketing platform? How do I, bring forward new content, make it findable, make it relevant, et cetera. So there's a lot of kind of characteristics that we think about when we think about digital transformers, but you definitely want folks who have religion as opposed to those folks who really have a green field, because Katie will then have to spend a lot of time with them trying to convince them to buy. Also, they, budget and all those other things are hard to come by. When you think about the firmographics, we are definitely focused on B2B. We are increasingly becoming curious about how our use cases could be applied to B2C. The fact that we focus primarily on anonymous data isn't a compelling use case for B2C, because as I said at the beginning of this discussion, those folks largely have a lot of the data that they need to fuel their technology. That said, we have found some use cases, especially with transactional B2B companies. The American Society for Mechanical Engineers is a good example, where they have a portion of their website where they actually sell their standards. We have found it's very effective at related product recommendations and those sorts of things. So again, in the future, maybe some B2C work, but right now our focus is really on the B2B companies. And companies like John Deere might have some consumer-facing business. John Deere, we know lawnmowers, but the majority of their business is B2B, construction equipment and farm equipment. And so, again, primarily B2B use case. They've got to be big. A lot of that has to do with they have to have the data to fuel our models and our technology. So, they have to have a pretty big website. The more complex it is, the better, because now they have the problem of findability. People can't find what they're looking for. And if you have to think about the numbers, it's certainly greater than $100 million in revenue and, 500,000 to 1 million web page visits, because those web visits and those page views are kind of the thing that fuel our technology. And complexity is always, the challenge, right? I mean, if you think about, Uber, right? They're a $1 billion company, does some B2B, but they're not complex. They've got a very simple business model and product portfolio. So, we're looking for where complexity is a problem, and we can help kind of their visitors sort through all that complexity. And this is an example of some industries that have worked for us. These industry names are actually the industries that are in LinkedIn. So if you were to, go looking in LinkedIn at some companies, you think you have a lead, you go look in LinkedIn at the company, it'll have a little industry indicated, and it will be one of these codes. The industries we have sold to in the past, I think, are all excellent. They are generally digitally advanced. And they fully recognize the types of problems that we have. When you look at the similar characteristics industries, some are better than others. I certainly think companies that are content rich, like management, consulting, and information services, those would be good ones. And so, we don't have enough experience with these to say if one's better or not. So I would encourage you to kind of refer back to the firmographics that or as qualities that make somebody a good client or not. But it, really is the problem space of, if somebody said to you, gee, we've made this investment in all this technology and we're having trouble getting the value out of it because we don't have the data, because, that begins to sound like, a good prospect for us. And if they line up with these industries and have kind of the scale that makes sense, then they're, give Michael a call. And just a final thing, it's been very interesting. I mentioned earlier about the chemical companies who are largely face-to-face and field-oriented, and how they've struggled under COVID to build pipeline and close it. We had a very good first half of this year. Sales were up 110%. But it was, largely due to, I think, folks being a little freaked out by the fact that, we have to be more digital. We have to increase our engagement. And so, there is almost an opportunity in all this madness, because I do think if a company was largely dependent on, say, trade shows, events, conferences for their lead generation, now they're struggling, right? Because they're like us, honestly, we're in the same problem, right? They're doing all these, these virtual conferences, which you kind of have a question mark about how effective they'll be. So, so again, this is almost an opportunity at this moment. And so again, if you think about people, companies that that are really wrestling with this, right, did have a lot of their pipeline wrapped around 2 events that usually happened in the second quarter, so they close fourth quarter business, they're now all struggling with that reality. And so this is just another way to have a discussion with a company about, what challenges are they experiencing? Are they seeing that challenge in developing leads? Are they seeing that challenge in increasing engagement, increasing the contribution of the digital properties to their business as they try to shift? And so again, helping companies respond to this challenge is one of the things that was, successful for us in the second quarter. So I think that's all I have for today. That is SoloSegment. Any questions?
Right. Yeah, well, there's a bunch of questions. I know that Gary has to leave shortly, so I'm going to see if I can get Gary's questions in first. He asked
I can't hear you. Why can't I hear you?
You can't hear me?
Michael, can you talk? No, now I can hear you. All right.
You can hear me? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
So Gary had some questions. He's got to leave early. So is SoloSegment focused on internal site search or on companies' websites? The answer is yes. It's really just for internal large B2B sites. And I answered that one actually on the site. Let's see. Would a product like Amazon's Kendra compete or work alongside Searchbox? Are you familiar with Kendra?
Yeah, I am familiar with Kendra. So Kendra is a platform, not a product. So, companies could build competitive. I mean, honestly, if a company wanted to invest in building a product like Searchbox, Kendra provides tools where that is certainly possible. Part of the challenge, though, is you need the subject matter expertise, right? I mean, anytime you get a toolbox, I have a toolbox in the basement. I am not a great plumber. I've got a lot of plumbing tools. So, certainly if they have the domain expertise to do that, you bet. There's lots of tools, whether it's AWS, Google, Microsoft, all of those platforms have some pretty good machine learning tools today, like Kendra. But the challenge is, do you have the expertise to actually bring that to the table?
Are you guys are you guys evaluating the sitemap, the structure, and the interlinking of how the site is currently put together and changing that, or just kind of with the AI doing a scan, understanding it, and then letting it catalog and find things easier?
It's really the latter, right? So the sitemap is an input to the content that we should index and then apply the NLP process and algorithm to. But what we're really interested in is not those relationships that people have created in the content. That is to say, the site owner has created. We're actually more interested in the relationship that the visitors see in the content. Because, if you see lots of dead ends, but it eventually leads to a path, well, that's the path, right? And so that's what we're doing. So yeah, but the sitemap is a seed.
And are you making any recommendations on improving, changing, or anything in relation to the content that's on the site, or is it just reading, understanding it, and serving it up as quick as possible?
Yeah, and again, it's the latter. We actually have a lot of our clients ask for services. So, sometimes it's somebody will ask exactly for that. Gee, we see some content gaps. Can you help us fill them? What we find is, and we've got this one client right now that they have a huge appetite for understanding and becoming aware of those gaps that they have to fill. So they have a services relationship with us. They have very little capacity to make those changes though. They don't have the IT folks. They don't have the content authors. It's just, so you kind of put, oh, here's 100 things. If you want to know, here's 100 things for you to work on.
Yeah.
And then 30 days later, they've worked on 0 of them, right?
Yeah, actually, Gary works in SEO, but with very large companies. So I think there's a really good potential synergy here.
Yeah,
and his focus is
absolutely.
content development. The focus largely is content development for the purposes of organic search, so finding you on Google. But I think there's, and a lot of it is automated. It's automated content optimization.
Yeah, you bet. Our goal is automation. And so we work with what's there. But, certainly companies, will say, hey, there's no guide box recommendation on this page. Why not? And it's like, well, there's a lot of reasons why not. But one of those reasons could be you don't have any place for anyone to go from here, right? It really is like a dead end because there's no related content. There's no related journeys. There's no related intent signals. And so that would be an indicator of, okay, well, let's go take a look at this and figure out why it's a cul-de-sac and help them figure that out.
Awesome.
The other interesting thing about SEO is you don't necessarily have control over where users come into your site, right? They might come in through what somebody yesterday described as, hundreds of doors and windows. And so when you're doing, say, paid marketing, you can control the page that people go to, right? They go to the one that you link from your advertisement, and then you can control their journey from that point on. But with SEO, they might come into a page that you wrote 4 years ago and you've completely forgotten about. And so Guidebox and the other SoloSegment products will help you surface those pages, those random pages that people come into on an SEO basis, and then get them into a place that's actually useful to the company.
You're also going to get a lot of pages, especially in the technical sites. My husband's in construction. So a lot of what he's looking for, what are the power loads, what are the compatibilities, what's a shipping weight, all the kind of technical details that are not really SEO appropriate. You're not going to, mine weighs 500 pounds, yours weighs 500 pounds. It's not an SEO issue. It's a detail that a user's looking for.
Okay.
Right.
And, just it's something that struck me as you said that construction and speeds and feeds and that sort of thing, the various use cases. I talk a lot about marketing, but there's kind of a parallel support case or use case in support. So especially if you think of like these IT companies, they have tons of support content. And it's very expensive for them to, answer phone calls. And so to the extent that
Which is why I was confused when you said that only taxonomists would be interested in Matchbox. I'm like, no, I think that people with large, account support teams of really bored 22-year-olds could save a ton of money here.
That's true. So there certainly are other use cases, you bet.
Yeah, because a lot of those, and a lot of times, especially in certain industries, those account teams are really bored 22-year-olds who don't know the field.
Right.
Well, and I was talking to a woman this morning who is a gamer. She's a professional too, but in her free time, she plays all these games, and she says the gaming sites there are all of these websites that publish cheat codes and things like that for the games, and have just millions of pages of content for all these different games and all the different cheat codes, and there's no way to get around them, and they can't even afford those bored 22-year-olds.
Does she want a boyfriend? My son is
Okay, let's see. So a couple more questions that were here.
Speaking of matching.
There you go. Exactly.
So Angela, you asked, so the AI stands in for a schema, it creates a schema for the content.
I think that got answered along the way. It automates the schema for you.
It creates a taxonomy, and tags everything.
That's a very good way of thinking about it. Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Let's see. Mark had a question. I would think that municipalities would be good. It says for B2C. What was your thinking there, Mark?
Well, I was just thinking I used to have a lot of work, say, when I was in Charlotte, and, Mecklenburg County, they had thousands and thousands and thousands of pages, and they had to maintain them all because for one reason or another. And if once a municipality reaches a certain size, I think you probably run into that where they have thousands of pages, and it's like some of them maybe only get accessed once or twice a year, but some of them are very frequent.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's a great point on market segment. There are really two, government, which you're talking about, and academia, so universities that that are certainly areas of interest for us. There are a variety of challenges in doing business with them. Government is generally, they have these not even paths, right? They are railroad tracks about vendors they use and what. So there's a bit of a break in there that we haven't worked on yet, because you kind of got to wrestle that community of suppliers and VARs and resellers to the ground in order to kind of break in. So there are some kind of structural challenges, but I absolutely agree with you. If you had a way for us to insert ourselves into those discussions easily, yeah, you bet. That would definitely be a community that we'd want to talk to.
I mean, yeah, if you've been on, and universities are a good point too, but if you've been on either university or municipality sites that are large, their search functionality is terrible.
Yes.
Yeah, and I would think also, I mean, that should reduce the number of calls coming in, right? Because people need to find things and they're not sophisticated. And if they can't find what they're looking for, they're going to try to call, and those call centers are expensive.
Also, that you're not capturing user data on a government site, huge.
Yeah.
Huge selling advantage.
I get that as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you bet.
So there was another question from Angela. Does Matchbox functionality require that they use Searchbox first? I think it's the other way around. So
they're actually independent.
Okay.
So you could do Matchbox without doing Searchbox, or vice versa. Matchbox certainly makes Searchbox smarter, so that helps. And anywhere else you want to use that data, because once that data is modeled, it can be used pretty much anywhere. But they're independent products; they can be used independently. And if you go for Guidebox, if you purchase Guidebox, some of the Matchbox functionality is actually in the back end of Guidebox.
Seemed like it would be. Yeah, that's why I asked. Okay.
Do you want to? I am now expanding the shared, and you may not see it, but it is recording this way. Do you want to show a demo to bring it alive?
I love live demos.
Can I ask one more question before we do that? Do you find, because you mentioned academics, does it need to be a site that's generating revenue directly off of its content?
No, it does not. As a matter of fact, I'm actually going to show you an example of a company, ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, that does generate revenue. But if you think of John Deere, they generate zero revenue from their website. So actually, I think they sell hats and shirts. So, you can buy logo wear, but, they generate zero. So it almost doesn't matter. Most of our clients are not transactional businesses, and that is not the use case, right? Most of our clients have distributors or sell direct or whatever. So they have, let me just move my microphone over.
So do they have a pain point? What's the pain point for let's say a university that has thousands of?
That's another thing that would be a challenge.
If it push to the user, do they care?
Right. They don't have, so for transactional business, it's how much revenue did I do? Right. Sure. For non-transactional businesses, right, it's how many marketing qualified leads did I generate? What's my engagement? What's my pages per session, right? They want to increase all of that stuff. For a university, right, well, I don't want students to complain. Okay, that's good. I don't want students to call the student, the bursar's office or whatever. So you might be able to tease out those metrics, but, again, in nonprofits, in basically nonprofits, because that covers government as well, it is hard to tease out, what's the purpose, right? What's the measurement? How is the mayor going to get reelected if things are more findable? And how he does that is he goes, oh, well, 311 got fewer calls this year, or we answered more calls with fewer resources. So we'd have to figure out what that metric is that really drives the behavior. And once you figure that out, then you can sell into that problem space.
There might be some studies on how poor search makes your website look amateurish.
There certainly is in the B2C space, definitely. In the B2B space, a little less so, but we have a lot of data that we've gathered, so we can kind of address that. But this
And to your own point, B2B expectations now match B2C expectations.
Well, the expectations of the consumers certainly do. The performance of the businesses leaves a little
No.
less to be desired. This is the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. They develop standards for the mechanical engineering industry. They were founded, 200 years ago when steam boilers were blowing up and killing people. They developed some standards around those things, and now they have standards around everything, right? Nuclear power plants, you name it. So I'm just going to go in here and do a search. There we go. I'm just like, why can't I see this? Because all of your faces are over it. Let me just move you off the monitor. So this is, I'm just doing a search, and I know that B31.3 is the process piping standard. So every time a search is done, we evaluate the success of it. And we evaluate the success of it understanding, the basics. Did a search result appear, right? Did they get a page with results on it? And did somebody click on one of those? But what we're really looking at is the behaviors, the success signals after the search to determine whether there was a success. And so now we know, after we gathered this data for a couple of months, in the case of large companies where they have lots of traffic, it could be as short as 30 days, we begin to get some sense of, for every intent, what the right answer is, because we have those success signals. And then we can use that data in lots of different ways. Like, for example, just doing this, right? I've typed in B31.3, and it's offering me all of these suggestions. And these suggestions are ordered by success, right? So they're trying to, nudge me towards a search that is more likely to lead to a successful outcome. And I'll just click on this one. Let's see where it goes. So remember I told you about Matchbox before? All of this information on the left side, these refine your search topics, and you can drill down into them. All of that is automatically generated by Matchbox. No human went in and codified the 300,000 pages on their website. Matchbox did this automatically. And so this is one use case of where Matchbox's data, the classification data around topic, and they have a classification model around industry where that data can be used. And again, when you think about how search engines work, they do basically for every keyword. In this case, we put in, or we used Guidebox or a search box's suggestion to help us put in this keyword. For this keyword, a search engine knows essentially what the right answer is. And it figures out what the right answer is because it has a relevancy scoring model. And we add our success data to that relevancy scoring model. So we make the relevancy scoring model much more powerful and much more accurate by taking all that success data that we've gathered over time and injecting it into the equation that determines what search results should come up. So again, this is an example of how Searchbox's success rankings, in addition to being displayed on a dashboard so that content owners know where they rank and can make their content more relevant, it also allows us to take some of the workload off of them. And if we have enough success signals to know that this page should be the top result, we'll boost it by using and overweighting the relevancy scoring with the search success data. And if I click on this, there we go. That gray box at the bottom with these 3 recommendations, that is Guidebox. So based upon what we've been doing on the site, and I should have gone to an incognito model, but just basically over time, and you see it slide to the right, get out of the way. It's basically knows that if I'm on this page, these other topics might help me accomplish my goal if this isn't the right thing. And it greatly simplifies for the user, right? Well, I don't have to go back and do another search if that's wrong, or I don't have to figure out which of the 40 links on this page will take me towards progress my journey. It greatly simplifies that cognitive load to allow me to take the next step. What's also interesting about Guidebox, and this is a project we're just beginning, like most companies who sell stuff on the website, and this is an example of where ASME does that, they have these related products. Their related products are generally pretty poor. And the reason is because in order to identify related products on their website, they have a human go in and code this, right? So whoever owns this page had to basically hand code what categories, what not or whatnot should appear here. And as you can see, I don't know a lot about process piping used in, say, a refinery, but these don't feel like topics that are related. And in fact, they're not, because we asked them and they're like, oh yeah, no, that's not right. But what's interesting is Guidebox really has nailed this, right? They're talking about this process piping materials thing, which might be a course. They're talking about this second thing, which is, well, let's just click on this because it has the word creep in it. There we go. Design and analysis of ASME boiler and pressure vessel components in the creep range, right? So another thing about, say, refineries, it might be industry similar. And then finally, there's this other process piping guide. So Guidebox is very, very good at figuring out, okay, if this isn't right for you, what else might be right for you? And it does that automatically without humans having to codify it. So there's an example of how the three products kind of work together on a website. And again, Guidebox is consuming all of that data to try to make more relevant predictions. And every given page, it might be more weighted towards thinking about intent. It might look at the journey data, but whatever the model determines is the data that should be most heavily weighted, it then spits out the recommendation.
So we had one other question from Angela, and then I want to wrap it up. And it was why it's called SoloSegment. And
That's a great question. So I wasn't here at the founding. The company was founded about 9 months before I joined. But this is the lore. The original intent was, how can we increase personalization in the B2B space and do it in a way that we really meet that expectation of the individual? It becomes a segment of one, and hence SoloSegment.
there you go. So, okay, I'm going to shrink this, bring everybody into a bigger picture here, at least on my screen and in the recording. Thank you. That was great. Steve and Katie, thank you so much. So anybody, as we pointed out, that has any B2B organization or research organization that has a very large website, and Angela, you and I have spoken about one. You said your neighbor is involved in one of those. We should definitely talk.
And a couple just came to mind as we're looking. So.
Yeah. And clearly, if there is some sort of, from their perspective, some sort of financial incentive, like with ASME, which, you think it's an association, but they sell standards, right? So if the person doesn't get to that right page, they're not going to buy the $90 or $2,700 standard,
sure,
where they just wouldn't know it was there. And so this can actually drive up revenue. Almost directly. There's clearly lots of benefits for sort of the indirect increased engagement, finding what you're looking for, for the company that is using the technology, making their visitors aware of the services that are relevant to them so that they don't bounce and go to a competitor.
Can I ask a question about the sales process?
Yes.
Okay, so I have a couple of people in mind, and would I give the name to Michael? And then do you guys research the website and go, oh yeah, these people suck, or no, they don't need us? I mean, or do you need me to do that before I make an introduction? Like, what kind of vetting do you do before the sales process? Because I've got a couple of people who are buddies and I can talk to them about it, but I would probably not represent it as well as you do. So where does the handoff need to happen?
Michael.
Yeah. So the first thing to do is you and I discuss it. I will do a little bit of research, find out how big their website is. If you've got questions for me, that's great. And then based on our discussion, if I think it has a chance, right, a decent chance, I'll talk to Steve or to Katie and say, we'd like to register this lead. Okay. What do you think? And, because I'm learning about the product and know it fairly well, it's usually a yes. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to close, but it's at least a start. And then the next step is, okay, let's get them on the phone. I could be on the phone if you want to go direct to a presentation with Steve and Katie. That's great if we can get them there. It's best if you can be on that first call as well, because you're the warm connection, right? And
right.
You're the relationship. And so they don't feel abandoned, like, oh, you just tossed me over the fence to these people I don't know.
I guess my level of sophistication with them would be, I've tried to find stuff on your website and it sucks. So I would hope that it would be a little more.
The first step in the journey is recognizing you have a problem, right?
That's right. I am an alcoholic. Okay. I am an alcoholic. I am an alcoholic.
You're powerless, and let's get you some MarTech.
But I assume that once we got on the call, there'd be a little more depth of prep. Okay, good.
Yeah, absolutely. So listen, it's top of the hour. Thank you, everybody. I hope this was
thank you.
helpful. It's a fascinating product, a unique product, and one that I think, I'm certainly proud that we're representing, and we've got a great team to represent. So thank you for joining, and we'll be doing more of these probably every, 2 or 3 months, because obviously you've seen it, you know it, but other people who haven't seen it will be joining. So thanks to those who are joining for the first time.
Thanks very much, Michael, for
Okay.
putting this together.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everyone.
Take
Fascinating.
care.
Brilliant.
And if you have
Okay.
questions, reach out to me.
Great.
Bye-bye.